The following program is being brought to you on the Voice America Health and Wellness Channel. For more information about our network and to check our additional show hosts and topics of interest, please visit voiceamericahealth.com. The Voice America Talk Radio Network is the worldwide leader in live Internet talk radio. Visit voiceamerica.com. The views and ideas expressed on the following program are strictly those of the host or guests and do not necessarily reflect the views and ideas held by the Voice America Talk Radio Network, its staff, and management.
Welcome to Falling Through the Cracks. Feel alive and thrive with Dr. Rebecca Risk. Do you ever feel that even though nothing seems seriously wrong and you pass all the medical tests, that you still feel that your health, pain, and fatigue are completely out of control? It doesn't have to be that way. Listen to the tips and suggestions given on our program today and take back control of your health. Now, here is Dr. Rebecca Risk.
Hi everybody, welcome to Falling Through the Cracks. Today we're speaking with Sebhia Dibra. She is an author, entrepreneurial, motivational speaker, and millennial lifestyle contributor. Her new book, Overcoming Acute and Chronic Pain, teaches health practitioners to help individuals suffering from pain with natural, non-drug, evidence-based remedies based on their personality type. Sebhia, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Rebecca. And that was a long title, so you did a great job with that.
Thanks. So what made you get involved with writing about pain?
Well, aside from, the opioid epidemic right now and how bad it is, I struggled with pain growing up. And this is more on the emotional side. I struggled with anxiety, and I didn't know what it was until my early 20s, and it was something that I was very passionate about growing up because I knew that it was I wouldn't say it was chronic, but it was constant. It prevented me from learning in school, and it affected my entire life. So getting into this project was more than just writing a book. It was, actually helping people with the treatment side and what happens after a long period of time.
So, you mentioned the opioid epidemic. Can you just explain what that is?
Sure. Right now, pain medications are going through the roof. People are being prescribed medication that they don't really need, and in addition to that, they are being prescribed pain medication by doctors who are, instead of using a complementary or alternative approach or just giving out prescriptions. Right now, over 100 million Americans suffer from pain. I mean, it's beyond that. Those were even statistics from, as much as 5 years ago. And pain costs over $700 billion per year. That is still something that is on the rise, and the figures are just absolutely outrageous. In addition to that, most people are not actually feeling better. And that is the biggest concern of all.
Well, it is a concern because if we're spending that much money, $7 billion, why aren't people feeling better? I mean, what's happening that so many people are in pain? What was that?
700 billion in terms of chronic pain and pain as a whole, which is, yeah. And what was, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, no, it just seems ridiculous that we're spending that much money and people are still in pain. There's obviously something missing in the system, because I know a lot of people also end up staying in pain. They have chronic pain and they're just managing it, and they're losing a lot of their lives. I know in your book, I can't remember the statistic, but you talk about how much of our lives are spent in pain as well. So we miss, a lot of what we shouldn't be missing.
Yes, and by no means am I asking people to get off their pain medications, because everyone is different, and I would suggest that it's on an individual basis. All healthcare is and should be. But there are alternative and complementary measures that need to be taken in the field. And right now, doctors are not trained to prevent illness and pain. They are trained to treat. So there's a huge difference between those two factors today. And those are most doctors. There's plenty of doctors out there who are aware of this and are diligently working towards finding a common ground in the medical industry, in the pharmaceutical industry, which is, part of all of this.
I found it interesting in your book. I believe you said that doctors are only trained in how to treat pain for 8 hours.
Yeah.
And then I think that's pretty significant.
If you look at the back of the Tylenol bottle, that is usually the given amount of, do not take more than, a specified dosage in the amount of 8 hours or 24-hour period, if, you do the math correctly. But, they are not trained to prevent, and they are, trained for the most part to diagnose and just give out medication.
So aside from medication, is there any other route that, our standard medical doctor will take to help somebody with pain?
Yes. They ultimately will go through a series of questions. They should. And based on those questions, they can also identify other factors, but this is very limited and it is not practiced as much as it should be. And that goes for my own personal experience and close, people in my family and relatives that have gone through this, as well as statistics and the general data of, the healthcare system right now. We have people who are, giving out prescriptions and pain medications, and they are not giving out the, proper protocol of other measures that are just as effective at treating their symptoms. For example, if you have chronic back pain, instead of, I know you mentioned chiropractic and at some point during our conversation previously, and that's one thing that can be taken advantage of, and it's really not.
Yeah. Well, it also seems to me like a lot of the alternative things, maybe they're afraid of them or they don't understand them because they're not only are they not recognized, but I often hear people can't tell their doctor or, they get told not to go.
You mean not to go to a visit at all?
Not to get chiropractic or not to do some of the alternative things because the doctor doesn't understand them, it seems, and knows that it might be able to help them.
Yes, definitely. And that also ties into the educational system right now and how people are educated and doctors are educated. And it's unfortunate that it's something that I've been bringing to light for years now, that we need, a new standard and new procedures to follow, new protocols to follow.
Yeah. So when we're talking about pain, and I know you mentioned that you had anxiety as well, and I think you said you didn't recognize it until you were older, which a lot of people don't. If they grow up with anxiety, they think that's a normal way of thinking. They don't even know what it is until someone explains to them, right? So how is this all affecting people overall in their lives so that anybody listening can actually recognize that what they're experiencing isn't normal?
Well, I like to explain anxiety and pain in this way, which, is part of also the spiritual revolution of the 21st century, and it's kind of like an awakening as well. But anxiety is the future, and the pain is the past. And when you are living in the past, and that is one way that pain is, brought into illness, is when your thoughts and your emotions and then the future is anxiety, and that is in a constant, you're not present, your heart may be racing, you may be having racing thoughts, everything is a little bit jumbled, and you're just really not present, and that's where the both of them are two extremes on, a lot, on two different sides of the spectrum. And in order to get into that point, the present moment is really what makes you more deliberate in choices, even in health, and what you do on a daily basis to contradict those two. And I find that pain and anxiety in that retrospect, in more of the energetic form of feeling it and feeling it and feeling it, those feelings are what harbors illness. And that's, I'm in my experience in life in general, and what I'm most passionate about is identifying these factors in people and really helping them see these factors. And it's kind of like a preventative measure that is taken to also prevent illness and chronic pain and acute pain and all types of pain when it is prevented at this measure.
So, in your book title is Overcoming Acute and Chronic Pain: Keys to Treatment Based on Your Emotional Type. So what is the emotional type?
So the emotional type, in basic terms, basically links you to 12 common chronic conditions. It was first brought about very long time, in the later 90s. And it should be something that people look into, because a lot of people have found a common ground with it. It's, the boundaries are more than a measure of, characteristics, such as like introversion and extroversion. It's basically how the person identifies and handles the energy of feelings, and it evaluates how we function. Then boundary types, for example, are highly sensitive in the ways we react from an early age. Those then boundary types react more strongly than other individuals to stimuli in general, and they respond more strongly to physical and emotional pain. Basically, they are very intuitive, and they are, as we like to say, a walking antenna. Thick boundary types, on the other hand, are more rigid and thick-skinned. They tend to brush aside emotional, indifferences and hardships than handling the actual situation. But experiments have actually shown that thick boundary types don't actually feel their feelings any less than thin boundary types. It's more of their presentation of how they handle those feelings. So the difference in that retrospect in terms of feelings would be that thin boundary types are more prone to, expressing, as in contrast with the thick, which kind of bury their feelings. And of course, going back to what I said earlier, these are precautions, really understanding yourself and where you see yourself emotionally will help you determine your thin or thick boundary type. Also, if you're in the middle, and what you can do to prevent certain ailments and pain, for example, that maybe, harboring and delaying your growth as a human being, really. So,
how does somebody go about figuring out what type they are?
Well, so, the boundary concept, it was developed, as I said, in the 1990s, and by Ernest Hartman of Tufts University, and it, his way of looking at personality differences and understanding the way that a person may develop a chronic illness in the long run is very distinct, and it can be done online. Actually, a colleague of mine created a book, Your Emotional Type, which is way more specific in the context of these two, and I highly recommend, by Mike Jarr and Mark McCosey. And this really refers, his definition, Ernest Hartman, really went into the personality trait concerning the degree of separateness between or connection between the mental functions and processes. So he that was his definition, and we again like to examine boundary types as more of like a measure of introversion and extroversion, or openness and closed-mindedness. We're more into the boundary type that will ultimately identify what that person is on a whole basis, rather than just picking and choosing. For example, I did say introversion and extroversion, but there was really no correlation to that. A lot of thin boundary types can be extroverted as well as thick.
Okay. So is there certain treatments that work better for each boundary type?
Yes, there are. I would say that, thick boundary types are more prone to dealing with their pain on a hands-on approach. That's meditation. It's acupuncture or massage. I love meditation, so that's something, I do have to say, though, meditation is definitely something to be considered between both boundary types. And then thin boundary types are actually more in the imagery-based or guided imagery and hypnosis. But in terms of like meditation, yoga, and mindfulness, I am huge on all three. I actually like Bikram yoga. And I've been practicing it for years. I would recommend all boundary types to really get into all three of those.
Okay. We're going to take a quick break. We're talking today with Sebhia Dibra. She is the author of Overcoming Acute and Chronic Pain. So we're going to be back shortly.
Your life, your health, your network. You're listening to Voice America Health and Wellness.
The largest syndicated alternative health talk program has come to the Voice America Network. The Dr. Bob Martin Show is the program that will answer your health questions and help you to heal your own body of many different ailments. Each week, you'll hear the answers that Dr. Bob gives to his callers that help them to be their own doctor most of the time. We'll also discuss developments on the healthcare front and what you need to do to keep your body in top form. The Dr. Bob Martin Show airs Wednesday mornings at 9 a.m. Eastern, 6 a.m. Pacific on Voice America Health and Wellness.
We are bombarded with information daily about happy life strategies, beauty products, and business success ideas. Are they truly going to make a change or just take the change out of your pocket? Tune in to Shelley's Show and Tell with host Shelley Hancock. Shelley will explore and recommend proven business ideas, as well as show you how to use the law of attraction to create health, happiness, and a prosperous business. Listen Mondays at 1 p.m. Pacific Time, 4 p.m. Eastern Time on Voice America Health and Wellness.
The Voice America Live Events page is here now to showcase your corporate, individual, or organization's live event. Visit voiceamerica.com/live events to see all of our past live events and find out more. Whether it's a multi-day conference, special speaker, or single-day event, we've got everything to make your event a success. We can do a few hours or a few days. For more information about taking your event to the next level, call Jeff Spinard at 480-294-6417 or email info@voiceamerica.com. Again, that's Jeff Spinard at 480-294-6417 or send us an email to info@voiceamerica.com.
Your life, your health, your network. You're listening to Voice America Health and Wellness.
You are listening to Falling Through the Cracks with your host, Dr. Rebecca Risk. To reach the program today, please call in to 1-866-472-5792. Again, that's 1-866-472-5792. You may also send an email directly to Dr. Risk. The email address is anantacalgary@gmail.com. Now, back to Falling Through the Cracks. Feel alive and thrive.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back. Today we're talking with Sebhia Dibra. She's the author of the book Overcoming Acute and Chronic Pain. So, Sebhia, we talked about the personality types, the boundary types, and I'm just wondering, we're not static, and I'm wondering if there are certain times where this can change for us.
Yes, we were just talking about that. I actually have found, and this is others as well as myself, that when you are going through a certain amount of stress, I have noticed that, I was mid-range maybe 2 or 3 years ago, and when I went through more stress, it fluctuated. My test scores fluctuated, and what I was dealing with at that time and how I was dealing with it, determined, different results on the boundary type. And I find that very interesting because we are more prone to, deal with and handle stress based on our coping mechanisms in the past. When we're put through an extraordinary amount of stress, that can push us to react in different ways and handle things in different ways. For example, instead of being overly expressive about it, if you're too expressive and you find that is not working, one can become actually stoic and more not expressive, almost like, they've given up, and that harbors illness in a completely different way than I would say the expressive, and that can also change and fluctuate. So I would be very mindful of that. It's not something that actually is stated or is brought up, but it is definitely something to keep in touch with. We're all very intuitive beings, and I think it's very important that if we are going through an extremely hard time, and you guys, everyone decides to buy this book, generally speaking, I think everyone is going through a very hard time. I'm in New York. There's a lot of changes going on. That can actually, make the score, I would say, different. And it might be a big difference, and it might be a little bit of a difference. But I would definitely keep that in mind.
Okay. So can you just explain what stress is and how that affects us?
Boy. Well, stress can be explained in a multitude of ways. Everyone deals with stress differently. Everyone has, feels differently when they're stressed out. But on a broader scale, in a general, terminology and I think common view, is it's really a mobilization of the fight, flight, or freeze response. That is something new that, you're either going into a situation, your adrenaline is up and pumping, you are retracting, you're kind of dismissing and flight, and then the freeze response is kind of just you're frozen. And that is another, response to stress that is pretty much still new and still being talked about. But in, a normal stress, everyday life should be distinguished between normal and stress that's like overloading you. So you can be stressed out and motivated in a sense. I wouldn't say stressed out, you can be stressed and motivated. However, you can also have a stress that is completely overloading you and preventing you from doing work. It can make you more tired. Your energy levels are very low, and you might have tightening of the chest, pain, difficulty breathing. In the long run, chronic stress, if you're feeling this on an everyday basis, it just shuts down your immune system and your body. And what that does, that's when chronic stress becomes a problem, because then chronic stress can lead to chronic pain.
So I always think it's good to talk about stress. I mean, it's definitely not the first time on the show that we have, but I'm always surprised how many people don't realize how stressed they are until it gets pointed out to them, or it changes, and then they're like, oh, I was really stressed and I didn't know. So I always think it's really important to talk about what that looks like and how it's affecting you, and then of course coping strategies so you can start to recognize it and then work through it so it doesn't become chronic pain or fatigue or all the other things that can happen after.
Definitely. I completely agree with you. And I think, I think through, we're kind of going through also a spiritual evolution right now of meditation and yoga and mindfulness. Those are all practices I highly recommend for anybody. Mindfulness is doing something. There is a difference between meditation and mindfulness. Mindfulness, you're actually focusing on something, but you're being mindful. So in a sense, you're in the present moment, but you're actually doing something. Meditation is you're more retracted and you're in the state of consciousness. There's so many different types of meditation. I personally have found heart-centered meditation and transcendental meditation to be really powerful. Someone who is new to meditation, I would highly recommend looking into repeating affirmations in your mind or concentrating, as much as on a dot, on a wall. And at least you're looking at something. Everyone can practice meditation. It's not something that you cannot do. When you say you cannot do it, you won't be able to do it the more you say you cannot do it. But it's actually really good for the mind to relax and not have any thoughts. And if you are visualizing something, for example, even in the law of attraction, I'm going to step into that right now. That's something that I think we're going to get into later on is visualization, but it's really a state of mind that will really, really help you in the long run. And transcendental meditation is something I really do see everyone doing. It's helped a lot of people, and it's continuing to help a lot of people, including veterans with PTSD, and it's very simple. It's not as difficult the way they practice it as, it makes
Can you just explain what makes it more simple than what people are thinking?
Sure. Transcendental meditation is a unique meditation approach that you basically, you can be trained by a practitioner or a meditation teacher that is in this field. You sit down and they give you a word based on your, who you are and what you've been through. The word is meaningless. It has no meaning. So essentially, you are repeating a specific word over and over again that has no meaning. So there's no attachment. For example, if I repeated mom over and over again, I would think of my mom and maybe have an emotional attachment. This, in a sense, is repeating a sound with no attachment, no meaning. And from doing this, you enter into kind of like a trance where you just become more silent on the inside and more aware. And then your, advanced meditators it is a very powerful way to connect to your subconscious as well. And eventually just, helps with your cognition overall, improves clarity of situations, relationships, and overall relaxes you and puts you in a deep state of consciousness.
So is there a certain amount of time somebody should spend every day doing it?
I would recommend an hour. Not everyone has an hour. So if you're if you're working all day, I would recommend, even as little as 15 minutes. People have done it in 5 minutes. And, once you start doing it on a regular basis, that is something that, you can go up to an hour. In the beginning, I really tried sitting still for an hour. This was over 8 years ago, and it was very difficult because I was not introduced to transcendental meditation as my first practice. It was a different type. But I would suggest if you do really get into this, you can do it every day for an hour. That is the minimum, I would say.
Okay. And just like what you said, you had trouble in the beginning doing an hour. Is there a way people can, start with a smaller amount of time and work their way up to that just so it's easier and they don't get frustrated maybe?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And I was introduced actually just into a completely different meditation. It wasn't transcendental meditation. Transcendental meditation, people have learned to practice it within a half hour who have never been introduced to it. It's way more easier, the approach. But in general meditation, sitting and stopping the mind is very difficult for people, just in a general meditation standpoint. And that's why people get a lot of, they become frustrated right away and they're like, I can't do this. As your first, meditation practice, I would definitely look into transcendental meditation if that is you.
Okay. And you mentioned earlier about visualization. What does that mean?
So visualization in terms of what I had mentioned it before, is law of attraction in terms of like just visualizing what you want and seeing an image in your head. That can be, used in the book as a relaxation technique. You are, the same thing as when I know people who have gone to the doctor and they're like, pretend you're on the beach. That doesn't work for everyone, right? But if you have, unconscious thoughts that become conscious in the effort to, that's part of it as well. Guided mental imagery can really help the subconscious because you are, seeing certain images, and visualization is more of a conscious thought process. And I would say it's like the law of attraction in a sense. You are directed towards self-improvement, and you are directed at what you can do in your life to make your life better. And that overall, okay, I believe, is relaxing for everyone. If you're in a certain situation that you don't like, you can visualize yourself out of it, and you make better decisions based on that. Law of attraction to me is not something vibrating towards you. You're not thinking of it every day, and then all of a sudden it appears. Visualization, in the sense of illness and in spirituality, is first of all, two different things. In the sense that you're helping your pain and the perception of pain by visualizing yourself in a circumstance that might not be favorable to you. And then in terms of, the more spiritual sense, it is helping you get to where you want to go, if that makes sense.
Well, just explain the spiritual sense, because I know that means something different to everybody. In your book, you talk about spiritual healing, and I maybe just elaborate on that a little bit. Sure.
So if you are visualizing a conscious thought process, such as, something that you need to work on right now. If you have back pain, for example, and you are visualizing happy thoughts, maybe not negative thoughts, that can actually change your perception of pain. Spiritual healing, on the other hand, is it is more of the unknown, at least what we can measure today in terms of, the scientific instruments that we do have. But we have seen that, our consciousness and awareness and our ability to meditate can all be measured. We have electromagnetic fields, so it can be measured, and, for example, Reiki and the spiritual healing, that all ties into, what is measured, what is not. Even though there's been studies that have promoted Reiki and spiritual healing, there's still lack of equipment, I would say, in the scientific community that is kind of delaying the spiritual sense of healing because it is still getting introduced into that field and that specialty. And I'd like to see that happen in the 21st century I really have seen great results with positive thinking, spirituality, and putting that together as a whole, in a holistic practice or in a different setting, alternative and complementary practice as well.
Well, I think that, it's an important topic. There's a lot of talk in the last year about mindfulness, which is where a lot of what we just spoke about, is kind of in that category of bringing, awareness to yourself. And especially if you're really stressed and the emotional part of the stress is contributing to your pain or causing it, then, you need to be aware that is happening and then have methods to be able to work on that as well.
Yes, definitely.
So we are going to take a quick break. We're going to be back shortly. We're talking with Sebhia Dibra. She is the author of Overcoming Acute and Chronic Pain. We'll be back shortly.
Opinions, options, answers. You're listening to Voice America Health and Wellness.
Frankly Speaking About Cancer is a program designed to empower survivors and their caregivers to deal with the social and emotional challenges of cancer. The show will invite physicians, researchers, nurses, social workers, patients, and caregivers to share their advice on how to live a better life with cancer. Join host Kim Tibaldo, President and CEO of the Cancer Support Community, Tuesday afternoons at 1 p.m. Pacific Time and 4 p.m. Eastern Time on the Voice America Health and Wellness Network.
What causes us to be sick? We're not talking about the actual illness or the scientific cause of illnesses. We're talking about your body and health. Listen for the healing whisper of return to peace. Each week, host Dr. Marianne Chase shows you how to listen to your heart to identify poor health, stress, and disease. You'll learn how to heal energetically and spiritually, as well as physically. It's time to depend less on the drugs and more on the heart. The Healing Whisper airs live every Friday at 11 a.m. Eastern Time, 8 a.m. Pacific on Voice America Health and Wellness.
Follow the Voice America Talk Radio Network on Twitter. We're at Voice America TRN. You'll get the latest fix on what's happening with our shows, this week's featured guests, and general happenings that you should know about at the Voice America Talk Radio Network. Now you don't have to miss anything when you're away from your home or office. Just go to twitter.com/Voice America TRN or follow along with us at Voice America TRN, the Voice America Talk Radio Network. We're on the cutting edge of social media. Can you keep up?
Opinions, options, answers. You're listening to Voice America Health and Wellness.
You are listening to Falling Through the Cracks with your host, Dr. Rebecca Risk. To reach the program today, please call in to 1-866-472-5792. Again, that's 1-866-472-5792. You may also send an email directly to Dr. Risk. The email address is anantacalgary@gmail.com. Now, back to Falling Through the Cracks. Feel alive and thrive.
Hi, today we're talking with Sebhia Dibra. She's the author of Overcoming Acute and Chronic Pain. So Sebhia, one of the things in your book that you do talk about is hypnosis. Can you just go into detail about what that is?
Yes. Now, I coughed for a reason. A lot of people think of hypnosis and they're like, oh, that is completely, a bunch of mumbo jumbo. And, it hasn't really been identified in the scientific community the way it has, I would say, most definitely in recent years. And that is due to the technology that we have. A lot of scholars like to think of it, and it has been proven in recent, just as last year in Stanford University, that is a neurobiological phenomenon. It is not a way of losing control. A lot of people are in fear that they just completely lose control when if they're under the hypnosis spell, for example. But it is a way of teaching people to enhance their control over their brains and their bodies. It's completely underutilized in healthcare, and it's a completely viable option, an alternative to painkillers, which obviously, as we talked about earlier in the discussion, that it's addictive to millions of people. Pain medications are completely very addictive, and they affect people. Accidentally, there's drug overdoses, and intentionally, such as suicide. So those are, it's something that, the alternative treatments are something that I'm really all for, and hypnosis is one of them. The Stanford School of Medicine had a study last year to see what was really happening when they were under hypnosis. And they have shown that hypnosis is just not something that it cannot be measured. Or, they took 57 participants and really had them on, in brain scans showing that, when you are thinking about something under hypnosis, you are in better control of how your body responds to that thought. So if you are thinking about something stressful, you also might be feeling that you're floating and you're completely comfortable, as opposed to having anxiety and pain over that, which is very important. I think that it is also important to note that as a whole, about 2/3 of people are more susceptible to hypnosis, and has been used to treat, of course, pain and anxiety and PTSD, which is really big in veterans and others suffering from traumatic events.
Okay, so can you just explain how hypnosis, like the process of it and what it's doing?
Sure. Hypnosis is basically a state where you are basically just in an but under the control of someone else who is basically the phenomenon of just really digging into your subconscious and allowing those thoughts and any reactions that you have that are programmed in your mind to come out and be dealt with in a very non-scary way, maybe how you perceive it as scary.
Okay. And is there a certain boundary type that responds better to hypnosis?
Yes. Definitely the thin side of the boundary spectrum are more able to identify with their feelings, and this type of technique works well.
Okay. So in your book, you've also talked about other things that, everything we've spoken about so far is visualization. It's all in working with your mind, which is really important because we need to change how the nervous system is responding to pain. But there are other types as well or other types of therapies that you recommend in your book. Can you just explain how massage and body work can help with pain?
Oh, definitely. Well, if you're suffering from, chronic back pain or tension headache, massage is something that, millions of people, if not more, are, they need that as a typical way of stress relief. It also increases blood flow, so physical knots and, as meridian points can be blocked. Massage therapy and other forms of body work, such as tapping, can really alleviate pain. And it's something that I would suggest for thick boundary types because it's more of a hands-on approach. But I would also, as well as meditation, yoga, and mindfulness, recommend that for everyone. And speaking of, I could use one right now. I would definitely say that, it's when people think of massage, they think of their backs, they think of their shoulders, they think of their, lower back pain. And that actually goes hand in hand with chiropractic professions because you're aligning the spine. If you can get someone who is a specialization in both massage and chiropractic work, that would be great. Everyone slouches. That is something that, we're sitting 9 hours a day at times. A lot of companies actually, in this millennial generation that are coming out, that are new, are more focused on the person and their well-being, and they will give a stipend for healthcare that is or take more breaks, get up. There's yoga on site, there's meditation on site. Now these are companies that are being started in this generation that are I would say everyone is flocking to because healthcare is huge. Of course, as we know, epidemic in the United States. But for the most part, everyone, a lot of managers, they're just like, you need to sit. I even saw one ad, I remember a few years ago, that said if you cannot sit for the entire 8 hours without getting up just for lunch, then you cannot work here. And I find that just like, that is just unacceptable. When you're sitting, that alone, as we've seen in tons of studies, just is horrible for your health. And when you're slouching, it reduces the amount of air in your lungs when you're breathing. So that also has, tremendous effects in the long run. And your brain isn't being, you're not using your brain at the potential that it has when you're not sitting up straight, or if you're sitting for most of the day. Creative intelligence comes, and working more efficiently comes from taking breaks.
It's an interesting thought. You have to sit for 8 hours. I mean, there are now offices that will give people desks that they can stand at. And I think it's in Finland, but it's in one of the Scandinavian countries. They just shortened work hours in some countries to 6 hours because people will actually, they'll be more effective in their job because they're not sitting there. I mean, most of us, when I used to work office jobs, I didn't work 8 hours. There's a certain period of time where you just have to have your brain take a break. And if you have to be sitting there, you're just going to tune out and pretend for a while. And I think everybody can relate to this because it's we just can't do something for 8 hours straight without taking a mental and physical break from it.
Yes, absolutely. And going back to what you said about Finland, I was just going to that was on the tip of my tongue, and you just took it out. I'm so happy you brought it up because, Finland has a huge amount of success right now with their children being top performers in the country, and are some of the smartest kids because they get to be kids. They're in school for 2 hours a day, and for the majority of the day, they're being creative and they're playing and they're using their imagination. So, in terms of all this, mental work and mind, body, and visualization, all these approaches together, this is definitely telling us something, as a society, especially in the United States where, you're working all the time, and that is more of the entrepreneurial spirit and the spirit in general. I'm in New York, and no one eats breakfast. Everyone's on the run, and they're consuming Starbucks, and it's this kind of mentality that's just is not going to heighten or advance us as much as it will if we really take the time to understand what our bodies need, what our mind needs, and practice some of what the other countries are doing right now, because obviously it's working.
Well, and when you mentioned Starbucks, that made me think of how also everybody's eating, which is also contributing to their pain and stress, is everything is fast, which is also the same problem with our treatment for pain, because we want a quick fix. So we want the medication, we want it to go away, and we don't want to deal with it. And most people, unless they've had a serious injury, can look at their chronic pain and go, that was creeping up over years while I was really stressed and working 60, 70 hours a week, sitting at a desk, and then all of a sudden now my back is out and I can't get it sorted and I have this chronic pain or whatever has happened. And then so we spent years creating the pain, and then we want this quick fix with this medication, which, as we mentioned earlier, isn't working and people are still in pain. So it seems to me that we just need to take everything in a different direction where, first of all, we're not creating that to happen, and other parts of life become important rather than just working hard, like taking care of ourselves and taking time to make meals and taking downtime, which is a conversation I have with people a lot. Just take 10 minutes a day where you're not doing anything, not watching TV, not maybe reading a book, but not stimulated in any way, and they can't fathom doing that. They feel guilty, or they just want to do something with purpose, as they I've been told before, and to me that's creating some of the problems.
Absolutely. And I love that you mentioned purpose, because a lot of people feel like they need to do something in order to feel accomplished, like physically do something, and that is totally not true. And that's why a lot of people don't feel like they are accomplishing anything in meditation. mindfulness might be something that most people practice, and that they're okay with it because mindfulness is actually doing something or being present. But meditation is just sitting down, and that whole view of it is false, because you're working your mind, and that is the ultimate instrument in your entire body. It dictates everything: your involuntary, immune responses, your voluntary immune responses. And a bigger thing to discuss, maybe on another phone call as well, is inflammation. And that is something I brought up, a lot in another book that was just released, Common Pain Conditions. And inflammation is pretty much the start of the, illness. Inflammation is the beginning, is where everything, kind of falls apart. It's when you're under chronic inflammation, that's where illness can harbor even more so. So, if you are, like you said, you're physically injured, that's one thing. You need to take the proper steps for that. However, if you are under a constant stress, or you're having anxiety, or you're not giving your body rest, sleep, another huge thing. Your body is more prone to being targeted in a more harmful way, and stress increases inflammation. So does nutrition is a whole other part of it, and you want to be careful with that as well. And I know we got into the vitamin part of the book as well, and I would say that one of the biggest things that I've learned, the number one vitamin that I would suggest taking is B12. I mean, there's tons of vitamins. Trust me, there's tons of supplements, but B12 has really helped with energy levels and just configuring all of that out. But supplements the whole entire new ball game as well. You want to make sure you're taking the right brand. Just 2 years ago and last year, they had this huge thing with the supplement companies not putting the right ingredients in the supplements listed, and the ingredients listed. For example, on ginkgo, they had dried beans that were processed in there. And if we're relying on supplements and we are not educated on the brands or what's being put out there, it kind of, it's a little discouraging to, because, especially if you are working all the time, what brands can you trust? And in the long term, going back to inflammation, and, another big thing is allergies. If you're taking a supplement and there's ingredients listed in it that are not really in it, or it's something completely different, that over time is going to affect you. And it really needs to be addressed very, very, now.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I mean, in Canada, we have very strict rules about supplements, but there's still some are better than others. So I always ask people if they are taking something different than a brand I recommend, to just do the research and make sure that this company is you're not wasting your money, basically. Yeah. Because supplements are necessary in our world. We're not living the lives that we should. We're too stressed. We don't eat properly. And even if we make those efforts, we're living in very stressful environments in our cities with the pollution and everything else.
Definitely.
So if anybody is listening today and they're wanting to get a hold of you or read your book, how can they do that?
They can go to my website, which I'm going to say my name, and a lot of people mispronounce it. So you've done a grandiose job at doing that. But it's SebhiaDibra.com, and you can browse my site. There's the link to Amazon. There's also a link to the publisher site, and you can find all the books that have recently come out, and contact me on there as well.
Okay, and your name is spelled Sebhiadibra, so SebhiaDibra.com.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Well, I want to thank you for joining us today. This was a great show.
Thank you so much, Rebecca.
Okay, thanks so much, and thank you everybody for listening. Be sure to make today a great day.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's edition of Falling Through the Cracks. Feel alive and thrive. Please join Dr. Rebecca Risk again next Monday at noon Eastern Time and 9 a.m. Pacific Time on the Voice America Health and Wellness channel. We'll talk more next week.